Hello, this story contains issues of racial discrimination and immigration, but the ending is completely different. Please watch until the end. Today's story will be told using pseudonyms to protect the identity of those involved. I'm Soo-young Kim, 38 years old, originally from Busan, South Korea, but currently living in the United States. It's been 16 years since I came to the US. I met my husband during a study abroad program when I was in college, and we started dating. Eventually, we got married, and after that, I ended up staying in the US to be with him. We have a beautiful daughter. I had originally wanted more children, but 12 years ago, my husband was assigned to a management position in Korea for his company, and we became a long-distance couple. After that, I couldn't conceive again. My husband is busy with his work schedule in Korea, so my daughter and I have been living alone here in the US for quite some time. I work as a private art tutor, using my degree in art, and lately, I've been busier than ever thanks to the unexpected rise in popularity of Korean culture. The recent K-pop wave has somehow made even my art classes popular among locals, which has been a pleasant surprise. Although my husband provides financial support, I often feel a sense of emptiness from being alone. When my daughter, Yoon-seo, was younger, raising her filled my days with both joy and challenges. But now that she's 15 and going through adolescence, our interactions are becoming more distant. She's taller than me at 5 feet 6 inches and has developed a figure similar to mine. Lately, I've been particularly worried about her odd behavior. Recently, I noticed she's been spending a lot of time with a boy named Ethan from her school. She brings him home after school, they go shopping together on weekends, and they talk for hours on the phone every night. Whenever I try to ask her about their relationship or listen in on their conversations, she gets upset with me. I understand what she's going through. After all, I was a teenager once too. It's clear she's fallen in love. Early dating is already something many parents fear, but the fact that Ethan is black only adds to my concern. Don't get me wrong, I don't think of myself as racist. Having lived in the US, I've experienced my fair share of discrimination as an Asian woman, so I despise racism. But I can't help but worry because black people often show up in the news for crimes involving drugs and violence. Of course, I know not all black people are like that. Many hold prominent positions in society, and we've even had a black president. But the area where we live has many low-income and undocumented residents, and many of them don't have high levels of education. There's a stereotype that men from lower-income black communities lack responsibility for their families and tend to walk away when problems arise. In fact, it's not uncommon to hear about black kids growing up without knowing their biological fathers. I don't want my daughter to end up entangled in such a complicated situation. I've advised Yoon-seo many times to spend less time with Ethan, but she doesn't listen and accuses me of having a prejudice against black people. One evening, during dinner, I carefully brought up the topic, trying to address my concerns. Yoon-seo, you've been spending a lot of time with Ethan lately. I think it would be good for you to spend time with other friends too. She looked up at me and said, "Mom, Ethan is a really great person. Why do you always have a problem with him?" I hesitated for a moment and then decided to be honest. I understand that you like Ethan, but I think you're still too young for a serious relationship. Plus, dating someone from a different race might bring extra challenges down the road. Yoon-seo's eyes sharpened, and she responded firmly, "Mom, that's just your prejudice. Ethan isn't like other people. He's polite and kind. Why are you stereotyping him?" I was taken aback by her response, but tried to explain calmly. "It's natural for me to worry about you, Yoon-seo. The world isn't as simple as we'd like it to be. I'm afraid you'll end up getting hurt." Yoon-seo let out a deep sigh and replied, "Mom, I'm 15 now. My feelings are real, and you'll see that Ethan is different from everyone else. Please, just trust me." I realized I couldn't push her any further. "All right, if that's what you believe, I'll respect your opinion. But please, just remember to always be careful and take responsibility for your choices." Yoon-seo seemed slightly annoyed and didn't say anything more. That night, I overheard her talking to Ethan on the phone from her room, and I found myself deep in thought. A few days later, I decided to look into Ethan's family background. It turns out Ethan comes from a relatively well-off family. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to attend my daughter's private school, where most of the students are from middle or upper-class families. The student body is mostly white and Asian, with few Black or Hispanic students. Ethan's family is financially stable because of his father, Matthew. Matthew used to be a famous professional football player and is now a coach at a local university. During his career, he earned a substantial income, and now they live in a large house in a wealthy part of town. Despite learning about Ethan's privileged background, I still wasn't comfortable with Yuncio dating him. That evening, I made up my mind to have another serious talk with her. After she came home from school, I called her over. "Yuncio, can we talk for a minute?" She looked tired but sat down when she saw how serious I was. "What is it, Mom?" I hesitated before speaking cautiously. "I want you to be happy, but I also worry about you. I did some research on Ethan's family. I know he's a good person, but I just want you to think carefully about everything." Though I disliked the idea of her being with Ethan, I tried to be as tactful as possible for her sake. Yuncio sat in silence for a moment before slowly replying. "Mom, I really like Ethan. And I know you looked into his family, but that's my choice to make. I'm happy when I'm with him." I listened to her and, though I struggled to understand her way of thinking, I realized I had to respect her decision. "All right, Yuncio, but promise me one thing. No matter what happens, don't lose yourself and always protect yourself." Yuncio squeezed my hand and answered seriously. "Mom, I'm strong and Ethan respects me. Please trust my decision." That night, I went to bed realizing that my daughter had matured. I knew I had to respect her choice, but a small part of me still felt anxious. I decided to do what many Korean parents might do in my situation: talk directly to Ethan's parents. One hot summer day, I visited Matthew's house. I wore a light sundress, perfect for the heat. The dress emphasized my waist and fell elegantly just above my knees. The fabric swayed gently in the breeze as I walked up to the door, and I felt comfortable yet put together. Matthew's house was impeccably kept, with a large front yard and a well-manicured garden, making a strong first impression. I walked up the small path and rang the doorbell. After a moment, the door opened, and a towering black man, over 6 feet 3 inches tall, stood in front of me. It was Michael, so I entered the house. But as soon as I stepped inside, I found myself caught off guard and speechless. I was pulled into his arms and led into the bedroom. I tried to resist, saying, "No, wait, stop," but my voice faltered, and I couldn't bring myself to shout. I was overwhelmed by his sheer strength, sinking into despair at the realization that I couldn't fight back. His touch grew rougher, and I froze, unable to move or think clearly. As the situation escalated, I was filled with confusion and fear, but one thing was certain in my mind. When this was over, I would report him to the police and make sure he was punished for what he had done. I believed he had to face the law for his actions. I was also determined to use this incident to show my daughter how dangerous her relationship with a black man could be and to make her break up with Ethan. If going through this meant protecting her from the same fate, I felt I could endure all the shame and pain. I steeled myself to fight for her, no matter what. I planned to go to the police and reveal the truth, and I would tell my daughter everything. I believed that once she understood my suffering, she would see the danger and end the relationship. However, conflicting emotions swirled inside me. I was terrified about how I would explain this to my husband and what would happen if my family found out. But I reminded myself that protecting my daughter was worth any sacrifice. I shouted at Michael, "Stop it. You're committing a crime, and I will call the police." Michael smirked and said, "Yeah, that's the script for today," before quickly moving forward with his plan. At that moment, I lost all hope and prepared myself for what was about to happen. But just then, Michael's phone rang. He reached for it from the nightstand and answered the call. I anxiously watched his expression. The voice on the other end spoke English, but with a distinct Asian accent. The caller said, "Michael, I'm sorry, but the Vietnamese woman we were supposed to send you today has been detained by immigration authorities. We'll send another one instead. We have women from China, Thailand, Laos, the Philippines, and Indonesia available. Having lived in the US for a long time, I knew there were many undocumented immigrants here, especially from Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Some worked in restaurants, markets, or docks under harsh conditions, while others were trapped in more illicit industries. Many women in these situations earned meager wages or ended up in the sex trade. Michael hung up the phone and stared at me, dazed. Then, all of a sudden, a look of panic crossed his face, and he asked, "Who are you?" Finally, I had a chance to introduce myself. I calmly said, "I'm Ethan's friend's mother. I came to talk about our kids." Michael's face flushed with embarrassment as he seemed to grasp the situation. "I'm so sorry," he stammered. "There's been a huge misunderstanding. I behaved terribly." I sighed deeply and responded, "I understand, but this all came out of nowhere, and it really shocked me. Can we talk about the kids again?" He quickly got out of bed and began putting his pants on. My face flushed as I hurried to get dressed too, though I couldn't find my underwear, so I just threw on my clothes. Thankfully, nothing too serious happened, but the situation still felt awkward. To keep the conversation going, we moved from the bedroom to the living room. He started praising Asian women, calling them delicate and very attractive. I knew many Western men had a particular preference for Asian women, especially since the rise of K-pop had made Korean women even more appealing to some. Michael seemed to have similar tastes, but I didn't have time to dwell on that. All I could think about was making dinner for my daughter, so I refocused on what I had come to talk about. I'm worried about how quickly my daughter Uncio and Ethan are getting close. I don't think it's good for them to get into something serious at such a young age. Michael laughed. "You're trying to stop them from dating? Why is that a problem? My mom got married and had kids in her early 20s. He shrugged, acting like my concerns were no big deal. His response made me angry. "School is for studying, not for dating. I don't care how you raise your son, but I won't just sit back when it comes to my daughter. I can't allow them to be together." I raised my voice, frustration spilling out. But Michael just shook his head. "We can't control our kids' private lives. That would be a violation of their rights, and it's against their natural instincts. They have the right to pursue love, don't they? Don't you? Beautiful Asian woman, it wouldn't be right to stop them." His words made me nearly lose my composure. It hit me that this man had no understanding of parental responsibility or how to raise a child. Realizing that talking to him was pointless, I decided it was time to leave. But when Michael noticed I was upset, his expression changed, and he quickly blocked my way. "Beautiful Asian woman, don't be so angry. It hurts me to see you upset. Look, I'll respect what you said and talk to Ethan. I'll make sure he's careful." His words seemed like a last-minute attempt to salvage the situation. After I got home, I called my husband and explained what had happened, but he was already irritated. "Soo-young, I told you to keep an eye on our daughter. Can't you even handle something this basic? I send money, but you're so busy with work that you can't take proper care of one child." His voice was sharp, warning me to handle the situation well. "If anything happens to our daughter, it's on you." I was overwhelmed with both frustration and anger. "I'm doing my best, but you're not even here. Are you expecting me to deal with everything alone?" I fought to hold back tears as I spoke. My husband stayed silent for a long time before sighing. "Fine, just be careful. If something happens to her, I won't forgive you." And with that, he hung up. I collapsed onto the bed, crying in frustration. The weight of having to bear everything alone in a foreign country felt too much to handle. So many men think raising children is the easiest job in the world, but it's mothers who shoulder most of the burden. And when you're raising a daughter alone overseas, like I am, the stress and hardships multiply. My husband's lack of understanding only made it harder. I craved comfort and felt myself sinking deeper into sadness. That night, I had a strange dream, probably triggered by the events of the day. The dream felt like a release of my suppressed desires and, in a way, revenge for my husband's coldness. "Mom, did you fight with someone last night?" my daughter asked me the next morning. I was caught off guard but answered calmly, "No, of course not. Who else but you could make me angry? She looked puzzled and asked again. But last night, I heard loud noises from your room. It sounded like someone was saying, "I'll kill you." My face grew hot, but I felt relieved. It was clear my daughter still didn't understand the adult world. That gave me some peace of mind, knowing she wasn't yet too deeply involved with Ethan. That day, I decided I needed to take action and solve the problem once and for all. I couldn't just let this continue. So I headed straight to her prestigious private school. As soon as I arrived, I requested a meeting with the principal, Mr. Alexander. I explained my concerns about my daughter Unacio's relationship with Ethan. As a top-performing student who brought honor to the school, I didn't want her academics to suffer because of an early romantic entanglement. Principal Alexander listened carefully and nodded. "Ms. Kim, Unacio is one of our most outstanding students. I, too, want to see her stay on the right path." Relieved, I made one more request. "Is there any way Ethan could be moved to a different class? That way, they wouldn't be so close." Principal Alexander paused for a moment, then smiled, walked to the door, locked it, and turned off the security cameras. His actions made me uneasy, but he spoke in a gentle tone. "This is a private matter involving students, so we need to handle it discreetly. We have to be careful." I nodded, agreeing. He seemed genuinely interested in helping, and I started to feel more at ease. Then he continued, "Your daughter is an excellent student, one of my favorites. But as for Ethan, well, I don't have a very high opinion of him." His face showed a hint of disdain. "There are two kinds of people I hate. Racists and, well, black people." I was shocked by his words, but felt a strange sense of alignment, as if, in some ways, we shared similar views. Carefully, I asked, "So, can you move Ethan to another class and keep them apart? If he causes trouble, could he even be expelled?" Alexander smiled. "To be honest, our school was built for exceptional students. People like Ethan, who come from wealthy black families, don't really belong here." His words left me speechless. I unconsciously reached for his hand and blurted out, "You're an amazing principal." But in that moment, I realized with horror what was happening. Unlike Michael's earlier advances, this time, it was the white principal, Alexander, who took things further. He began acting inappropriately, something I hadn't expected from a man who always appeared so dignified in his suit. "Principal, what on earth are you doing?" I tried to push him away. He grinned. "What am I doing? I'm just asking for a favor in return for helping you. Why else would I bother?" With that, he perched on his desk, unbuckled his belt, and dropped his pants. To my utter shock, he was wearing leopard print women's underwear. "If you want me to take care of things for you, you'll need to satisfy me first. You like that, don't you, Korean baby?" I tried to get away, but Alexander started threatening me. "If you don't agree, be ready for your daughter to face even more trouble with Ethan." His threats made my whole body tremble, but I refused to be humiliated like this. "That's not happening. I'll transfer my daughter to another school." I spoke firmly, but Alexander's tone grew even darker. "Do you realize I can manipulate your daughter's middle school records? If I make her look like a troublemaker, no school in America will take her." His words filled me with dread. I never imagined things would take such a horrifying turn. My daughter's future was at stake, and for a moment, it seemed like I had no choice but to give in. But deep inside, rage and disgust were bubbling up. I slowly stepped toward Alexander, trying to figure out a way out of this nightmare. Just then, the door flew open with a loud bang, and in walked a massive man, nearly 6 feet 6 inches tall. It was Michael. Without a word, he punched Alexander. Michael was a retired football player, known as King Kong for his incredible strength. Alexander had no chance against his punch, and I could hear the sickening crack of bones breaking as I stood nearby, watching in disbelief as Alexander's face swelled and he lost consciousness. Security and police rushed in shortly after, and the whole thing felt like a scene out of a movie. As the situation unfolded, I was relieved that Michael had stepped in, but I couldn't help wondering how he knew to come to the principal's office at that moment. Had he come to save me? That thought left me confused. Michael turned to me and spoke. "Are you okay?" That must have been terrifying. His voice was calm and steady, with concern and anger flickering in his eyes. Still stunned, I managed to respond. "Yes, I'm fine. But how did you know to come here?" Michael hesitated for a moment before explaining. "I saw news online about the things Alexander had been doing. He's been saying some terrible things about Black students and their families. When I heard, I came straight here. I didn't know you'd be here, but I guess I showed up just in time." As he spoke, I began to piece the story together. "I see. I can't thank you enough. You saved me from something terrible, Michael." He nodded and smiled. "I couldn't stand by and let this school's injustice go unchecked. The police tried to arrest Michael, but I protested fiercely. He was protecting me. Alexander started this. The officers listened to my testimony and decided to investigate instead of arresting Michael. Days later, I learned the full story behind Michael's actions. Alexander was a notorious racist, particularly against Black people, and had been making offensive comments publicly. Someone recorded his racist rants and leaked them online, causing a huge scandal. Given the current climate in the US, such comments had serious consequences. Alexander lost his job, and Michael posted a $30,000 bail and was released. He became a hero in the Black community for standing up to the principal. I visited Michael at his home to thank him. He welcomed me warmly and said with a smile, "There's no need to thank me. I just did what I had to do." To my surprise, Michael had become the head of the school's board of trustees after the incident. The previous chairman had stepped down due to the fallout from Alexander's actions, and Michael took his place. This wasn't just a coincidence. It reflected how important racial issues had become in America and the growing influence of the Black community. Michael assured me that I didn't need to worry about Unasio's academic record anymore. His thoughtful and careful manner moved me deeply. "You don't need to worry about Unasio anymore. I'll make sure every student in the school gets a fair education," Michael promised with a warm smile. For the first time in a while, I felt a sense of relief and gratitude, and I thanked him sincerely. "Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks to you, I can finally relax, and so can my daughter." Michael nodded and added, "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll do whatever I can for you and Unasio." Through this ordeal, I learned the true meaning of justice and courage. With Michael's help, I had protected my daughter's future, and we could now start fresh at the school. Michael's smile reassured me, and he continued, "Really, you don't have to thank me. To be honest, I have a thing for women like you, Asian women." There was a clear hint of affection in his gaze. My heart skipped a beat, and I looked away, feeling my pulse quicken. Lately, I had been dreaming about Michael more and more, and his presence was starting to occupy my thoughts. But just as the moment grew tense, a couple approached Michael. The man was tall and lean, with pale skin, while the woman, who had a slightly darker complexion, seemed to be of Southeast Asian descent, maybe from the Philippines. The couple greeted Michael warmly, and the woman glanced at me a few times. After they left, Michael explained, "That was Emily, my ex-wife. She's from the Philippines." Surprised, I asked, "You're divorced?" Michael nodded. "Yes, it's been a few years now. We split up for various reasons, but we're still friends." I gave him a curious look and asked again, "So that's why I've never seen your wife around?" Michael smiled and nodded. "Yeah, you probably thought I was living alone. I've gotten used to it, but it doesn't mean I don't feel lonely." His words made me realize why he had invited me over. "That's true. It's lonely being on your own," I said. Michael quietly nodded in agreement. "Yeah, but I think it's time to start considering a different kind of life. Sometimes you need a fresh start." His words made me think. It felt like we were both ready to face new beginnings in our lives. "Is your ex-wife remarried?" I asked. Michael nodded again. "Yeah, the white guy you saw with her, that was her husband. He was actually our divorce lawyer." I was speechless. As summer break approached, Michael suggested that we take a trip with the kids. At first, I hesitated, But after confirming that Unicio and Ethan weren't too deeply involved, I agreed. Plus, I was feeling incredibly lonely. My husband hadn't contacted me for almost 2 weeks, and my heart was a mess. Truthfully, I already knew what was going on with my husband. I had received an unexpected message from a friend in Korea not long ago. "Soo Young, what are you up to? Still in the US? I just saw someone in the hospital who looks like your husband. He was holding hands with a woman who looked pregnant. Are you guys divorced?" I was devastated. It was true, even though I didn't want to believe it. My husband had been coming to the US less and less, always using work as an excuse, and I never suspected anything. I asked my younger brother to look into it. Feeling depressed and overwhelmed, I decided to accept Michael's offer. We took his RV and headed to Las Vegas. Back in Korea, I'd never have taken my child to a place known for gambling and entertainment, but in America, I learned there were plenty of family-friendly things to do there. So I decided to go with the flow of the local culture. The trip turned out to be an unexpected joy for us. During the journey, I discovered something surprising. My daughter and Ethan were close friends, but not lovers. Ethan liked another white girl in their class, and my daughter, Unicio, had kept this a secret out of loyalty to her friend. When I found out, I felt relieved, but a part of me wondered why my daughter hadn't pursued a relationship with Ethan. Michael, hearing that his son liked someone else, didn't criticize him but respected his feelings instead. Unicio, noticing this, voiced her frustrations to me. See, Ethan's parents are so open-minded. While my concerns about my daughter's romantic life disappeared, my heart remained conflicted. That evening, we had a lovely time making barbecue and tortillas by the RV. Michael was incredibly kind and charming. After spending a few nights in the RV, we moved to a small roadside motel. However, the motel's thin walls made it hard for me to sleep as I could hear Michael's loud snoring. Feeling increasingly lonely, I quietly stepped outside, climbed into the RV, and lit a cigarette, craving a moment of solitude. I found myself longing to return to my homeland, feeling isolated and exhausted living here. Suddenly, the RV door opened, and Michael stepped in. Without a word, he pulled me into his arms and kissed me passionately. I hesitated but soon responded to his kiss. However, I took his hand and said, "We shouldn't be doing this. I'm a married woman." Though my heart ached for something different, I didn't want to lose control. I was afraid of crossing a line I couldn't return from. Michael, though clearly disappointed, respected my decision and quietly left the RV. I sat on the floor, tears streaming down my face, reminding myself that I was just an ordinary woman who didn't want to make immoral choices. Yet, at the same time, I questioned whether it was wrong to simply want a normal life, to be happy. The next morning, we arrived in Las Vegas. After what had happened the previous night, it was hard for me to meet Michael's eyes, but he remained as warm and kind as ever. I reflected on why I had been so shaken, realizing I still had unresolved feelings for him, making me unsure of how to proceed after this trip. Las Vegas, though known for its adult entertainment and casinos, also offered plenty of family-friendly activities. We started the day at Adventure Dome, where the kids laughed and screamed as they rode the roller coasters and other indoor rides. For lunch, we enjoyed a buffet at a nearby hotel, trying a variety of dishes. In the afternoon, we visited Madame Tussauds and took fun pictures with the wax figures. That evening, we watched the Bellagio fountain show, all of us mesmerized by the synchronized water jets dancing to the music. That night, after returning to the hotel, I took a moment to myself. That's when I received a text message and several photos from my younger brother, Minho. The photos left me in shock. In them, a man was seen carefully supporting a pregnant woman as they walked together. The man was my husband, and the woman was his colleague, someone I had met before. I remembered her from a party we had hosted in the US. In the photos, she proudly displayed her pregnant belly while my husband looked after her with care. That's when everything clicked. My husband wasn't just busy with work, he was busy with another woman, someone he had left me and our daughter for, getting her pregnant back in Korea. Right then, Minho called. His voice shook with anger. Sis, it's true. He's cheating. He's living with that woman in an apartment in Seoul, and I found out he even bought it for her. You can't let this go. Should I get some guys together to teach him a lesson? My heart sank, but I knew I had to stay calm. I didn't want my brother to make the situation worse, so I tried to keep my voice steady. Minho, don't do anything rash. Listen to me carefully. If you handle this that way, it'll only backfire. Just gather more evidence for me. I promise I won't let him get away with this. Once I have everything, I'll deal with it legally. Stay calm. We can't handle this emotionally. Minho was silent for a moment before agreeing reluctantly. All right, sis. I'll keep gathering the evidence. But don't hold it in too long. This must be so hard for you. After hanging up, I sat in disbelief. I was furious with my husband's betrayal, but I also knew I needed to stay composed and plan carefully for what was to come. I had to think about what was worth fighting for in my marriage and what kind of life I wanted moving forward. That night, I couldn't sleep. The neon lights and the vibrant chaos of Las Vegas only heightened the turmoil in my heart. It was hard to accept that my marriage was over, but I knew I had to face reality. Divorce was the only option now. The next morning, I met Michael. My emotions were still swirling, but I wasn't ready to tell him what was going on yet. Michael talked about the day's plans. I think we can take it easy today. The kids must be tired from yesterday, so how about we spend the morning at the hotel pool and go shopping in the afternoon? I nodded, trying to hide my turmoil. That sounds good. I'm sure Unicio will love it. The day passed peacefully. The kids had a great time at the pool, and Michael and I chatted while watching them play. But my mind kept drifting back to the photos, the betrayal, and the crushing realization of what my marriage had become. After shopping, we returned to the hotel. Later, Michael invited me to the hotel bar, saying he wanted to talk. I accepted, though I felt uneasy. Michael gently asked, Soo-young, is something bothering you? You seem a bit different. I hesitated, but eventually I opened up. Yesterday, my brother told me some shocking news. My husband is having an affair in Korea, and the woman he's with is pregnant. Michael's eyes widened in surprise. Soo-young, I'm so sorry to hear that. That must have been so painful. Are you thinking of divorce? I nodded, my voice steady. Yes, I think it's time to end this marriage. I can't stay in a relationship that no longer works. Michael reached out and held my hand gently. I'm here for you. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Whatever decision you make, I'll support you. His words brought me a sense of comfort, and I finally felt a bit of peace amidst the chaos. Thank you, Michael. Your support means a lot to me. I think I'm finally ready to move on. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but knowing that I wasn't alone made it more bearable. After our trip to Las Vegas, we returned to our normal lives. The time away had allowed me to process some of my emotions, but the weight of my husband's betrayal still hung over me. My daughter, Unicio, had begun to sense something was wrong, and she started asking questions. At first, I didn't want to burden her with the truth, but one day, she approached me cautiously. Mom, Dad has someone else, doesn't he? Don't hide it from me. He barely talks to me anymore, and I heard you talking to Uncle. It's pretty clear. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the worry behind it. I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. Yes, Unicio, you're right. It's been hard, but now we need to stick together and get through this. You're my strength. Unicio held my hand tightly and said, Don't worry, Mom. I'm on your side. We'll get through this, just the two of us. In that moment, I realized my daughter wasn't a little girl anymore. She was someone I could lean on too. A month later, my brother had gathered all the evidence. He had photos, texts, and voice recordings that confirmed my husband's affair. With everything in hand, I called my husband. We need to talk. I started calmly. I know everything, your affair, the pregnancy. There's no reason for us to stay married anymore. Let's get divorced. At first, my husband tried to deny it, but when I mentioned the evidence my brother had collected, he realized he couldn't lie any longer. Soo-young, I'm sorry. His voice was low, full of regret. "It's all my fault. I don't know how it got to this point. But can't we try to think about this more carefully for Unacio's sake?" I listened, but my mind was already made up. There's no future for us. It's not healthy for Unacio either. It's better to end this now before we hurt each other even more. My husband sighed and finally accepted that divorce was inevitable. The road ahead was clear now. My husband and I agreed to divorce, though the division of assets was initially contentious. He tried to negotiate for more favorable terms, but given the overwhelming evidence I had collected, and after consulting with my lawyer, we eventually settled. I was able to retain the house and a significant portion of our assets. The divorce was finalized, and with it, my long marriage came to an official end. Throughout this process, I found strength in Michael's unwavering support. Without him, I might have spiraled into a much darker place. His kindness and understanding helped me move forward quickly, and I became determined to focus on my own happiness. Post-divorce life was not easy, but I began to take small steps toward rebuilding a new life for myself. I was no longer tied to my past, and I had a renewed sense of hope. Michael continued to stand by my side, always ready to lend a hand or a comforting word. Our bond grew stronger, and I found myself feeling more and more drawn to him. 2 months later, I discovered I was pregnant with Michael's child. When I shared the news, Unacio congratulated me wholeheartedly, thrilled to see me happy again. Just a few days later, Michael and I decided to have a small, intimate wedding at a local chapel. The simplicity of the ceremony felt just right. In the US, it was easy to plan a wedding with minimal fuss, and I appreciated that freedom. On our wedding day, we invited only close family members. Unacio acted as my bridesmaid, and the chapel was filled with warmth and joy as our new beginning was blessed. During the ceremony, Michael held my hand and spoke his vows with sincerity. "Su Young, I love you. From now on, we are one. Let's raise our child together and live a life filled with happiness." With tears in my eyes, I responded, "I love you too, Michael. We are truly a family now." Our wedding may have been small, but it was beautiful and full of genuine love. We promised to walk through life hand in hand, and from that day on, my life was filled with a sense of fulfillment and peace. Michael was always by my side, and each day with him brought new joy. Our love grew deeper, and I was grateful every day for the chance to start a new life with him. Our marriage gave new meaning to my life in America, and together, we built a happy, loving home, dreaming of a bright future. That's the story for today. Please subscribe and like for more.